All right, go ahead.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, and this is the Cluster API office hours. As always, please add your name to the attendee list. And if you have questions or if you want to comment on anything, please use the raise hand feature. And if you have any topics you want to bring up, go ahead and add them to the agenda under discussion topics. So to get started, if anyone here is new and would like to introduce themselves, or if you haven't been to this meeting in a while, I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and say your name and why you're here and what you want to get out of this meeting. Go ahead.
Hi guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Manik. I am joining from one of the startups called Spot.io. I work on a product called Ocean for containers, and we are particularly interested in the progress for Cluster API and sort of how the development is going for different cloud providers, and would love to integrate with that for Ocean in the future. So looking to explore sort of where the work stands right now, what is the maturity of the project, particularly after the launch of the V1 Alpha 3, if there is a available roadmap already, and potentially if there's an opportunity for contribution, what those areas are. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, welcome. Anyone else?
Hey, hi, this is Arjun. I'm currently working at Razorpay. So we run around 30 clusters in our company currently and work extensively on Kubernetes. So I'm just checking out if I can contribute to Cluster API project. Yep.
Cool, welcome. Anyone else? All right, if not, I'll keep going. So before we get to PSAs, I just want to point out, if you have any questions, any general questions, even basic questions, there's a section under demos called general questions and provider implementer questions. You can go ahead and add any questions there throughout the meeting and we'll make sure that we answer them. Okay, so now I'll let Vince go ahead and give the PSAs.
Yeah, thank you. I have two PSAs. The first one is we trying to revisit the issue proposal and exclusively focus on the CAP process. If you open the PR that I linked there, this PR not only removes the issue template, but it also kind of put some policies in place and in the contributing guide. There has been some minor comments, but in general, we have agreement that this is what we want to do going forward. The gist here is that we have right now 20 something proposals in the open as the issues. And some of them have very light details. Some of them have not been commented. Some others instead there has been a lot of back and forth, but 90% of them have actually moved to a full CAP Google Doc. So to facilitate this process and also to reduce the burden on maintainers to keep track of all the proposals, I opened this PR, but I also added a section into the Cluster API meeting to kind of give space for folks to add their proposal links that are ongoing and we won't comment or we want to discuss. So if you look at the changes, there's also contributing changes in the doc here. So for feature and bugs, we'll use issues. We already have a template for those. Then here it outlines the proposal process that we want to follow in general, just a Google Doc, and the template is under Docs proposals. There's also some requirements and expectation for the experiments. Experiments are a nice way to get a POC in Cluster API under the experiment folder, but they should follow these rules. For example, not change existing APIs, have a clear graduation process, and ultimately get to GA. And what we mean by that is to get merged into mainstream Cluster API in the next release. Any questions, comments, concerns on this one?
Are you going to do lazy consensus?
Yes, well, like we can. I wanted to get this in hopefully this week so that we can revisit and close the old issues and move everything to a Google Doc, hopefully. I'm trying to do this before we, or after, like a little bit after we release 0.3.4 to just, because we have 160 issues open right now.
Okay, I don't see any raised hands. If I miss your hand, please ping me because I'm still new at this. So I'm trying to track them, but might miss it. So I think we can move on to the second one.
Yeah, second one is actually kind of related. There's an issue to align on code freezes and release timelines. We have been changing, like, kind of like, for example, right now we're trying to focus more on Alpha 3 because like there is like a large like community that like wants to adopt Alpha 3, and like we want to give more time. And we have a lot of priorities as well in Alpha 3. So if you have thoughts, and like I would really urge you to like put them in a comment in here, and at some point we'll like open up a PR, probably again to the contributing guide, so make sure that like there's one place where we can read them all to outline like what we want to do in terms of like code freezes, proposal time process, and just like when we want to guarantee a release maybe, and stuff like that. That's all I have.
Great, thank you, Vince. Any questions or additional last minute PSAs? No. All right. Okay, so I don't see any demos for today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to add them throughout the meeting. I don't see any right now, so we'll keep going to discussion. And I think, Jason, you have the first one.
Yes, so for a while now, we've been a bit bottlenecked on being able to do timely reviews and maintenance work on the GCP provider. Gab has volunteered to help share some of that burden. So there's a PR out there to add Gab as an additional maintainer for Cluster API provider GCP. We're planning on giving that 1 week lazy consensus timeout period. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please go to that PR and raise them. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Andy has his hand raised. Go ahead.
Thanks, Cecile. I would like to add that if anyone is also interested in helping maintain the GCP provider or any other provider, please reach out here on Slack, the usual communications channels. We can get you involved in pull request reviews, and eventually, if things go well, hopefully over to reviewer and maintainer status. So definitely looking for additional people if you're interested.
Yep, great point. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Which channel you mean? Cluster API Slack channel or specific provider channel? Like example, if it is OpenStack.
Well, not every provider has a channel. So if it does have a channel, I would recommend using the specific one. And if it doesn't, then just Cluster API.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Okay, so service health for rolling updates.
Hi.
Moish, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this might be a little bit random, and I'm not sure if this is really the forum to discuss it, but I'm going to just throw it out there for comments. So basically, the problem that I'm facing or that I'm trying to solve is how do you do a rolling update of a cluster while maintaining the health of the services underneath it? And something like a pod disruption budget will get you a little bit of the way there, but it doesn't really understand the health of something underneath it. So I'll take, let's say, Elasticsearch as an example. So if I have an Elasticsearch cluster over 3 nodes, I create a new machine deployment and roll those nodes. So let's say you roll the first node, and then a new pod comes up for that service, and that pod will become ready. But Elasticsearch itself will be in a yellow health state. And then you continue rolling, and you roll the second one. The pod comes back up. The pod is healthy, but the service isn't. So the question is this something that should be handled in Cluster API? Is there other mechanisms that could be used to solve this, or is this just a very unique problem to myself?
Go ahead, Jason.
So I think there's kind of a shared responsibility here. I don't think we want to take ownership of the complete problem, but there is a certain aspect that we need to make sure that we're respecting, such as if pod disruption budgets are available, we are doing operations in a way that respects them. Right now, we are not overly mindful of that when we're doing the deletion and node draining process. But it's going to be, it might be interesting to see how we hook into this without kind of doing some of the stuff that like the autoscaler has done around replicating a lot of the scheduler logic to make some of these types of decisions.
Brian?
Yeah, I just want to react to the point about the ready flag. If you're not ready to continue rolling, then don't go ready, is my advice. We do that. We have pods that come up and stay non-ready for 20 minutes, and you know, works great to halt the rollout. You have to adjust your parameters so that the rest of your system doesn't go batshit at that. But yeah, just that's my reaction to that piece of the problem.
So you can do that, but the pod itself is 100% ready. It is serving traffic. So it meets the definition of a readiness or a liveness check.
So I'm trying to stress that the definition of ready also includes don't proceed with a rolling update. And in the situation I'm speaking about, we use it precisely to do that.
The problem with that is that if your service is unhealthy, then your pods will never become ready and live, and then they're going to start crash looping. So it's not a case where you want to. So it's not a case where you want to kill the pod, but it's something that you don't want to continue another step.
Yeah, well, it's probably not the right meeting for this, but I'll say again, we have pods that stay unready for 20 minutes. It's perfectly fine. Nobody crashes them. Works great.
Okay.
So I see Vince says in the chat, probably worth a KEP with use cases and possible solutions. And I saw Jason was also raising his hand. Did you have any other comments, Jason, or was that?
No, we can continue the conversation asynchronously. Thanks.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks all.
Okay.
All right.
So I'll do a KEP then.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to circle back to questions because I think this was the last discussion item, and there are a few questions. So the first one is, where can we review upcoming roadmap items? And I see someone has already posted the link. Perfect. So there is a roadmap page in the book. If you go there, it's actually been updated quite recently by Vince to include the new V1 Aqua 3 Plus plans. So this should give you a pretty good idea. And then the second one is, what's the maturity of the existing providers? Does anyone want to answer that?
I can't. Sorry, I can't raise my hand like this. I'm a host, but yes, like we have a list of providers here. Generally, like AWS, like we work on it like actively, Azure as well, and like the others like listed here, like in bold, for example, like in this case, AWS, Azure, Metal 3, and vSphere. I think they're the one that like are known to support Alpha 3. Oh yeah, that's written there. Thank you. And the others like may or may not have been updated. So this list is not 100% up to date because, for example, we know that GCP has been just updated, right, Jason?
Yeah, and also, for example, OpenStack, I know supports V1 Alpha 3 as well.
Right. So you are welcome to update this list, but yeah, like these are in Malta definitely the one that have been updated, and we know that they support Alpha 3.
Do we have any like awareness of like customers already like using it or like potential POCing it or like even like qualification of like the cluster API end to end for all of these providers?
Yes. So I don't see the New Relic folks here. Oh, Seth, you're here. Do you want to speak for AWS?
I can. I apologize. What was the specific question?
Like a real world production, like uses or for these providers.
We certainly do have 6 multi-hundred node production clusters using the AWS provider and dozens more that are much smaller. The one detail there is that those are all what's the term now? Pivoted or self-hosted. They each Kappa manages just the one cluster that it's on. So we don't have a lot of visibility into how the scaling goes, like if you have one management cluster that manages all of that stuff, but I know other folks are doing that, and I think it works pretty well.
Thanks. And Yasin, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I guess for CapV, we are also having users that are using it into productions. I guess the only way to really know is to reach out on the cluster API specifics, Slack channels, or reach out to the maintainers.
Yeah, +1 on that. I think each provider or some of the providers have their own Slack channels and office hours, so you can also lurk there and learn more about the specific providers.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so will Cluster API deploy Kubernetes inside Kubernetes or using standalone nodes where components run as systemd services? Or do we give options to consumers, or do we give consumer options to do both? Vince, you want to take that one?
Sure. So would Cluster API do it? Cluster API can do a lot of things. We don't like necessarily like have a provider that does that today. There was one that was posted in a Cluster API issue that like ran Kubernetes in Kubernetes, but as far as I know, it was mostly for testing purpose and an experiment. And I don't know if someone can link to that, but I can find it later as well. Give consumer the option to do both. Like this is actually really possible today. So Cluster API is composable. You can bring your own bootstrapping mechanism. Right now we use KubeADM, and you can bring your own infrastructure. So technically, like, so there is a life cycle that like the machine controller, for example, follows. And if you follow that life cycle, you can create possibly like a Kubernetes cluster in a Kubernetes cluster, or using standalone nodes to run systemd services. So there is extension points that you can use to hook these things up together, but we don't have any way to do that today.
Thank you. I hope this helped answer the question. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out on Slack or GitHub. And anyone have any additional questions they want to ask now that they just came up with? Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so I'm going to move on. Okay, I think we're also out of discussion topics unless anyone has anything they want to bring up that wasn't on the list. No. All right, great. Okay, so I think this is issue triage time, and I might need help from Vince or Andy on what the specifics are on doing that because I've never done it. But I assume we just go to the issues and then how do I sort is it by label?
Go to milestones and do, not that one, the other one down
Oh.
below, and choose issues with no milestone.
Okay, got it. Great, and then we just look at each one?
That's right.
Yep.
Okay. Cool, so first one, instructions for using external etcd cluster are incomplete. Actually, Andy, do you want to help me drive this? Because I know you usually, and
I can if you'd like, or Vince.
Or Vince.
Sure. I can. Do you want me to share or you want to?
No, I can keep sharing. But,
okay.
Just, do you want to do the first one and then I'll do the following ones?
So instructions for using external etcd are incomplete. I briefly looked into this. I don't know if there have been like other comments, but there was a PR out, if I believe. I don't know if Scott is here, but yeah, we should definitely fix this and in Alpha 3. So what I would do is I'm going to set the milestone, and we should probably add you to the milestone maintainer, so you can do that.
Yeah, I don't think I have permissions.
Yeah, we usually just do milestone, like this could be 03x, and we don't have to set labels, I guess, in this case. You can set a priority.
We set a priority, yeah.
Yeah. So you can do / priority, and then, for example, in this case, you can see important -soon.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Any objections? Well, I think this.
Oh yeah, and what Warren said /help.
/help as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying like that adds the help one in on it.
Yeah. I was just going to say in the chat, there's a good point that we should, there's a CAP that proposes to auto add the needs triage label on new issues. So I guess that'd be something we could use for triaging new issues that come in as well.
Nice.
Okay. So next one. Add security context, service accounts, and pod security policy to Cert Manager, Cluster API, Bootstrap kubeadm, and Control Plane kubeadm. So this one's already marked as help wanted. It's a new feature. Do we have any idea of which, would this be 0.3 as well?
I think so. I don't know if there's any repercussions though doing like, I mean, it should be backward compatible. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Any objection to do this in 03x?
Go ahead, Warren. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I had so I attached the cluster, the Cert Manager lifecycle issue on this. I just thought that if we do tackle this epic, as I know it was kind of mentioned in the roadmap, so whenever we do tackle this sort of managing the Cert Manager lifecycle and cluster cuddle, we could tackle this issue as well. I just wanted to track that.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so I guess for now we can put them in the same milestone, 03x, right? And then since they're very closely related. Any objections to that? Vince, can you please apply the milestone?
Oh, I did.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, and I don't think this needs any other labels. Okay, UI dashboard for visualizing cluster API managed clusters.
So we do, Vince, I don't know if I haven't seen this one. It's the comment you have down there. It talks about John's plugin. Yeah. So this isn't something I think we would maintain in the long term. We may have it for like in a contrib section, or maybe a for the Octant plugin or any other UI visualizations we'd want to do. But it's probably not a primary focus of this group, but it's certainly a nice thing to have.
Yeah, probably gonna set milestone to next for now. Like, I mean, I don't know like if there's anything actionable rather than like we're gonna demo this, but like it's an external like effort for now. I can comment on that though later.
Yeah, let's talk to John and see what his plans are for his plugin.
Okay, sounds good. And then last one, also a pretty big one, allow existing Kubernetes clusters to join a management cluster. So I'm going to say there was some discussion about this in the Cluster API provider Azure office hours last week. And a few people were actually very interested in the possibility of doing this. But I don't know if this would be a 03x. Go ahead, Andy.
So this is a giant can of worms. I think that it's possible that we could potentially find ways to adopt existing infrastructure and maybe have it be managed as Kubernetes, or sorry, as Cluster API resources, but I think it's very difficult and probably would be an extremely narrow slice of the range of everything that people might want. So, like, for example, if you provision, whether it's bare metal or a virtual machine in whatever shape you do, and it doesn't match how Cluster API expects to be managing things, like I wouldn't expect that Cluster API could just take over a VM or a bare metal machine and start managing it in every single case. So we may be able to find some 10, 20% use case that we can cover, but again, it would have to be very specific and spec'd out.
Makes sense. Yeah, I see a lot of people want to react to this. So I'm just going to read the chat first. So Ace says +1 to can of worms, but interesting nonetheless. And then Jason says +1 to maybe telling folks how they can do it, but -1 to actually supporting it. So something like, here are instructions if you want to attempt this, but big warnings all over the doc saying that this could blow things up. And then Yasin, go ahead. I think you were next.
Yeah, so I would echo what Andy said. This might work on the happy path. That is basically you're using kubeadm files are and configs are consistent with Cluster API expects. As for implementing it, I wouldn't see this as something that is strictly supported by Cluster API. I'd expect an external tooling to provide such thing for the 10-20% use cases that we can support.
Daniel?
Thanks. Yeah, I think this actually goes against the goals of Cluster API, right? I think one of the goals is to enable cluster administrators to treat, I don't know, I guess the phrase is clusters as cattle, right? And instead of pets. So if you have an existing cluster I think there are projects that help you migrate workloads across clusters, and so you could use those together with Cluster API. And certainly, I think Cluster API could talk about the use case of migrating from one cluster to another, and maybe helping to orchestrate that, or thinking about that use case, maybe integrating some way. But yeah, that was my reaction.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Any
so
comment?
just gonna like close with one comment, like on from my part, like we put it like into the non-goals because we wanted to keep the scope to like manage instances that we know like how they were spun up, and like not to go into kind of worms that, like, and as Andy mentioned, in general, like I do think like this could live outside of Cluster API. Like it could be some project on the side that like it's not supported, but we won't stop it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, makes sense. I think someone else had their hand raised. I'm sorry, I don't know how you say your full name, but S. Pellegrino.
Sorry, yeah, Seth P.
Thanks.
Yeah, so what we've found is that there's certain operational benefits to being able to like adopt like pausing the reconciliation of a thing by deleting a managing resource or turning off the Kappa controllers and then fixing up some state that we didn't know how to get out of otherwise, and having the stuff adopted back into management. So I think there's definitely, like, I agree 100% with what Vince said, that like mostly this should live outside of Cluster API, but like Cluster API shouldn't prevent it from happening, right? Like if there's machine deployment isn't adopting existing resources that otherwise it would be able to manage perfectly normally, I think that would be a bug in Kappa, or Kappa rather, that we should fix.
Okay.
I can comment on this and provide feedback and probably close at some point.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. Lots of great comments here. Okay, anyone else? Or I think we're ready to move on. All right, well, this was the last one. Is there anything else that I should be doing? Warren?
Yeah, I added a discussion topic at the last minute here. Sorry about that. But I just wanted to kind of just inform the community that I'm starting to take a look into a ClusterCuddle templating work. I saw there was a issue open for that, and some discussion on it. And I'm just starting this week to like look into the design and work that might be necessary for supporting templates or templating within ClusterCuddle.
Do you mind giving a few details about what that means for people who aren't familiar?
Yeah, so right now, ClusterCuddle has a very simplistic templating format where it just does variable substitution. And some of the feedback we've been getting is to support other kinds of templating mechanisms because right now we support like cluster template, which can have different flavors, but depending on the various options, it could kind of just start exponentially growing into different kinds of templates, which could make it hard for operators to manage the various template files, and then just have variable substitution. So we're looking into other templating engines. One of them that was mentioned in the issue was called YTT. So we're looking at that. And the initial work right now is just to create a sort of interface. So nothing will actually change, but the initial work will just be like providing a layer, like an interface layer, where you can have a pluggable template engine. So by default, everything will still remain the same. It'll still support the variable substitution templating, but that was like my initial thought this week, was start working on sort of going through the ClusterCuddle templates that we support right now, and making sure there's just a nice layer for future pluggable support for other kinds of templating engine. So
Awesome. Any questions or comments on that? I see David has a question in the chat. Any thoughts to default values for substitutions?
that's a good point. I have not thought of that support right now but I'll make a note of that to actually support default values. We'll see if the YTT supports stuff like that. I don't know if, well, for example, if YTT does default substitutions, but yeah, good point.
Thanks. Prakash? Prakash, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so question is, example I'll give you, we use the template and then in Airship, which I am representing here, and we do use Kustomize to do changes to it, all the substitutions and all those which come. So if we have a template and if we are going to change other than the variable substitutions, how will it impact the current relation with Kustomize? That's what my thinking.
Yeah, that's a good point, Prakash. So the idea is, ideally, if we design this right and we create this sort of pluggable sort of interface, we could create like sort of a customized library or a YTT library or a queue. That's another tool I've come across. So it should be able to work, but as of now, like again, nothing will change. The variable substitutions will still be the default way of doing things. So it shouldn't break any of your existing sort of customized operations that you have going on.
Yeah, but the question is it a parallel effort, or how do you describe it? Because we start using Kustomize, we have some issues, we try to solve them. Now, after solving the problem, if this takes another parallel route and Kustomize is shut down, then we are in soup. So how does it go forward roadmap? That will be interesting to us. Yeah,
that's a good point. I think what I'll do is I will attach the issue that I'm kind of looking at, and if you have any comments, then I can try and summarize and take all that into account. But I'm hoping that this will not break or it won't diverge too much. Again, Kustomize is just yet another templating mechanism. So
okay.
So we have a few hands raised, so I'm going to let those people speak. I think Andy was first.
Thanks. I wanted to address Prakash's question. We use Kustomize right now to build out the YAML for our release bundles. So when you are building Cluster API or any of the providers, we use Kustomize to generate the infrastructure provider YAML and so on. We may or may not be using Kustomize for the cluster templates that are the examples that we have for that ClusterCuddle can use. And this is just this is making templating pluggable. So if you want to keep using Kustomize, you can keep using Kustomize. If you want to start using something else, we're going to probably add optional templating implementations, and we will consider having something like a contrib folder in the repos where folks who are interested in maintaining YTT or Q or some other templating set can do so.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Siddharth, sorry, is that how you pronounce your name?
Hi, yes. I was gonna move on to the next topic that I added to discussion topic. If anyone else has anything else on the previous topic, I can.
Sorry, I don't know if it's just me, but we can't hear you very well. It's very low. Okay, it's not just me. If you don't mind typing your, so we can read it, or trying to speak louder.
How is it now? Can you hear?
Yeah, this is a bit better.
So yeah, I was gonna explain another feature. So if anyone else has any other comments on the Warren's cluster cattle templating, I can come back to this later.
Okay, let me just get to Fabrizio then, and then we'll come back to you because I see Fabrizio also had his hand raised.
Thank you, Cecile. So just circling back to the per cache point, I think that we should always remember that we are doing this change in the 03 series. That means that we will ensure that everything will be compatible, and that means that if you today have a pre or post pipeline that you use customized, this will work. Will just continue to work. What the change of Warren is going to do is to add a new feature and a new possibility to eventually improve your pipeline in future. So I don't see problem, or there is no intention to break any user with this change.
All right, Sadaf, take it away. Post-apply experimental feature.
Yeah, so I already demoed it in one of the cluster API meetings last month. So this is about applying a set of YAMLs post cluster creation. This can be CNIs or RBAC rules or anything that customers need to apply right after a cluster is created. So I just wanted to let the community know that I am going forward to resolving the issues raised in the design doc. So if you have any other comments, concerns, please add it to the design doc that is in the link that I posted in the doc. So yeah, that's all.
Awesome, thank you for the update. And then I see a last discussion topic that sneaked in. I think, not sure what's your first name, Farouz?
Yes, sorry, I just added it very late at the last point.
No worries.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say is that we, from the MetalCube community, we were proposed to send a proposal regarding the external machine remediation as discussed the last week. And then we proposed it yesterday, and there were like a couple of questions and the comments. Thanks everyone for that, for the review. But my question was, how do we move next with this? Do we need to answer to those questions and then open the actual proposal on the GitHub or something else? I just wanted to hear the input from the community.
Sorry, I can raise my hand. Usually the process is that we allow for like a week or two for folks to kind of like go back with comments, and we make sure to address all the comments, and that all parties involved are like, okay to move this into a PR. And then once it's a PR, like there's going to be another round of feedback on it, because PRs usually reach an even wider audience. If you do feel that like you might want more like an extra meeting or something, like feel free to organize one, and I could drop maybe like a link or work with folks that you're working with to kind of schedule one. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. In terms of the proposal, I did review it. I had a concern that like it might be trying to solve like two things at once. But do you want to chat briefly then now, or should we do it offline?
Yeah, thanks. I think it would be nice to have it offline, and also if we can arrange another meeting just specifically for the remediation, that would be also really nice.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks.
Joel? Was that
Yeah,
it?
sorry, I was going to say it'd be good to have a meeting where we can discuss that, but then it was already said. So it just, as long as that discussion is public, then other people who are interested can join. That'd be great.
+1. Thanks. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Prakash here. Yeah, I did. This is from the last week. Firuz has brought this in. There was one conclusion which I wanted. The conclusion at the end of that I could not attend, but the video said that in the video somebody said that there will be two ways of doing. One is to address the health of the node, and the other will be for the specific timeouts, etc., so that you don't get totally bogged down by the bare metal node remediation. Is that correct? So there are two ways to go about it. Is that still holds?
So if you look at the proposal, so the first, what we are proposing is that to introduce the new CRD called, for example, machine remediation request, that will be used to request the remediation from the provider specific or the provider custom remediation controller. And then the timeouts on all this stuff, it can be like specific to each provider's remediation controller, like whatever you want to, how you want to build your remediation controller is up to you, like basically. But we just for now want to kind of separate the health checking and the remediation functionality of the machine health check from the KP right now, and then let providers do the remediation on their own if they want to. But if they don't want, they can still rely on the deletion of the machine.
Okay, I'll go through the whole proposal and then get back. I think next week. Yep. Thanks.
Prakash.
Thanks for
It
this.
sounds like there will be an additional separate meeting to discuss this specific proposal, so I encourage you to attend that one as well if you're interested. All right, I think that's it for today. Thanks so much, Nadir, and everyone else who helped take notes throughout the meeting. I forgot to ask at the beginning, but that was very helpful. And thank you all for participating, and I hope you have a healthy and good week. I'll see you all next week.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Cecile, for running the meeting.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Bye.
Bye.